פרק רביעי, משנה א'.
Fourth chapter, first Mishnah. פרק זה עוסק בדיני הטמנת החמים בערב שבת. This chapter, it's a continuation of what we've done before. It's going to deal with hatmana, dipping in or isolating. And when are we isolating? On Shabbat. We're going to see we're not allowed to do anything. We're not allowed latmin b'Shabbat, but we are allowed to latmin be'erev Shabbat. And even in erev Shabbat, there's going to be things we're allowed latmin in and things we're not. V'inyan hatmana, what is it hatmana? Hainu, which means שמורידים את הקדרה הרותחת מעל האש, we remove the boiling pot from the fire, וטומנים אותה בתוך דברים השומרים על חומה, and you would put it into things that will keep it hot. וכבר הזכרנו, we already mentioned in the end of chapter ב', שלא התירו חכמים לטמון, that the sages permitted only to put it inside, בדברים המשמרים את החום בלבד, only in things that are going to keep the heat. אבל בדברים המוסיף חום, but things that will increase the heat, as we discussed, אסור לטמון אפילו מבעוד יום. One is not allowed to לעשות הטמנה, even when it's still day. In other words, which is interesting, הטמנה might be worse than leaving it in an oven, on the fire.
No, as long as you don't increase fire.
Yeah.
You cannot latmin.
That's what I'm saying. Hatmana can be worse. It depends on what we matmin. But hatmana can be worse than leaving it on the fire. It might be leaving it on the fire is better than latmin. We'll talk about it soon. שגזרו חכמים, why? שמא יטמון התבשיל ברמץ. What are they afraid of? So the atmana itself, in things, if you're allowed to put it in the fire, what are you afraid over here? Things that are not fire. So they're afraid maybe you're going to take remetz, the soot. Efer is the soot from the fire, the black stuff from the fire, where it's still hot. ויבוא לחטות בגחלים. And then you're afraid that you might touch it to bring up the flame. מי שתחשך, when it becomes dark. כדי להחיש בשולו. So that it's going to increase, bring about the cooking. So משנתנו באה לפרט. Our Mishnah comes to teach us דברים המוסיפים חום, what things increase heat, ודברים שאינם אלא משמרים את החום, and things that just keep the heat. So it's going to be easy. Things that you're going to put inside and the heat will increase, you're not going to be allowed to latmin, and things that don't increase the heat, you are allowed to latmin.
They're going to tell us what material we can put down there.
That's right. Which material increase, which material doesn't increase.
What wood to use?
I don't know if you do mulch. You do mulch?
What's the mulch?
Like you put stuff, vegetables, old leaves, and
no.
Yeah, but do you know that when you do the mulch, people do
gassy.
Not only gassy, it becomes hot inside.
It can blow up.
So he says,
fire.
How does it become hot? There's nothing. You put carrots. You put leaves. Oh, so those are dvarim המוסיפים hevel. You wouldn't be allowed to put things in such a thing because why? You can see it increases the heat. Once you put a pot over there and the heat of the pot and the whole thing, the mulch itself will become even hotter. And that you will not be. So if you've got a mulch pile in your backyard, you're not allowed to put the pot inside. That's exactly what. So it tells you what things are going to act like a mulch pile. They're going to increase the heat, and what things are not. Do you do mulch? No. So but you know what I'm talking about.
I had a friend that had a mulch, and he told me I have a fire there. And he said, but I always have fires because it's hot. It's something.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Something that it does.
Okay. במה טומנים ובמה אין טומנים. In what do we dip things inside? We isolate things and in what we don't put it. קדרה שמורידים אותה מעל האש, a pot that you take it off from the fire, בערב שבת, before שבת, ורוצים לטמנה כדי לקיים את חומה בשבת, you want to dip it inside something so that it will remain hot on Shabbat, במה מותר לטמנה ובמה אסור, in what are you allowed to put it, in what material, and in what material you're not allowed to. אין טומנים לו בגפת, you're not allowed to put it in גפת. What's גפת? פסולת של זיתים, it is the offspring of זיתים. Again, it will increase the heat. או של סומסומים, or of sesame seed, הנשארת לאחר סחיטת שמנם, that is remained after you take all the oil away. So whatever leftovers from olives or from sesame, those things will increase the heat, you're not allowed to put it inside. ולא בזבל של בהמות, not allowed to put it in the doo-doo of the animals, of cows. It's again, it will increase the heat. Yeah. לא במלח, not in salt, לא בסיד, לא בחול, not in seed. How do you say seed in English? Lime?
Lime.
Not in lime and not in the sand. שכל הדברים האלו מוסיפים הבל. All the things increase the heat. ואסור לטמון בדבר מוסיף הבל. You're not allowed to put it in anything that increases the heat, כמו שביארנו לעיל, like we explained above. And all the things you're not allowed to do it, בין לחים, בין יבשים. Even if they're wet, even if they're dry. It doesn't matter wet or dry. בין שבדביר לו הם לחים, בין שהם יבשים. לא בתבן, you're not allowed to do it in hay, ולא בזגים. And not in זגים. What's זגים? פסולת הענבים. It's the remainder from the grapes שנדרכו בגת, after you stepped in them in the gut. ולא במוחין, and not in all kinds of מוחס. What's מוחס? כל דבר רך. You want to know what the מוח is? Whatever the birds put in the nest, that's a מוח.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. כל דבר רך, anything soft, כגון צמר גפן, for example cotton wool, חוטים הנסרקים מן הצמר, like material that comes from the wool, בלוי בגדים, all kinds of garments, וכיוצא בהם נקרים מוחים, all kinds of material. ולא בעשבים, and not in grass. בכל אלו הארבע, in all these four, תבן, זגין, מוחין ועשבים, hay, grapes, all kinds of materials and grasses, אין טומנים בזמן שהם לחים. When are you not allowed to put in those four? When they're wet. In other words, when they're wet, they're going to increase the heat. But when they're completely dry, all the things don't increase the heat. Yeah? You would say, when is wool... by the way, wool, even though you didn't wet it, can be wet. As you know from your sheep, actually you wouldn't know, but your wife would know, they have oil on it. So the question is this oil, is it wet or is it not wet? For example, בזמן שהם לחים, at the time that they're wet. יש מפרשים, there are those who explain על פי הגמרא, שדווקא כשהם לחים מחמת עצמן הם תוטמים מהם. It says, when are you not allowed to use them? When the grass is wet from itself, not that you watered it, or the wool is wet from the oil of the sheep. That's what we're talking about. כגון בצמר, for example in wool, מבין ירחות הצאן, that comes from a place of the sheep, או מן הסמוך לעלייה, that comes next to the fat of the sheep, שיש בו לחלוכית טבעית, that it has in it wetness, which is natural. אבל אם הם לחים מחמת מים שנפלו עליהם לאחר שיבשו, but if they are wet because they became wet with water after they became dry, then מותר לטמון מהם, then you're allowed to put in them because they're not going to increase the hevel. אבל במשנה תורה, in the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam disagrees, כותב הרמב"ם, the Rambam writes, לחים ואפילו מחמת עצמן. It says any kind of wet, whether it is from the sheep, whether it is by water, I don't care, it's always going to increase hevel and I don't lie you. ומשמע שלדעתו, and it looks like according to his opinion, אם הם לחים מחמת דבר אחר, הרי הם חמימים יותר. It looks like even by him it's the opposite. It says if you put water, it warms up even more. וכל שכן שאין טומנים בהם, and how much more so, you would not allowed to put the pot in those materials. אבל טומנים בהם כשהם יבשים. But the Rambam agrees that you're allowed to put them inside these materials, all the four materials that we just discussed, when they are dry. בזמן שהם יבשים אינם מוסיפים הבל. At the time that they are dry, they do not increase hevel. Again, this is, for us it's easy. It's easy. How would you do that? You would go and ask somebody to come with a thermometer. You put the pot inside, you will measure the temperature. You see the temperature increases, you're not allowed to. You see the temperature doesn't increase, you are allowed to. Simple enough. That's what they did in those times. They saw which materials increase the heat, which material didn't increase the heat. Simple. אבל טומנים בהם כשהם יבשים. But in all those things, you're allowed to put them when they are dry. שבזמן שיבשים אינם מוסיפים הבל, that they don't increase הבל. Finish that area. טומנים בכסות ובפירות ובכנפי יונה. You're allowed to put it in ksut, means clothing, all kinds of clothing, ובפירות, in fruits, ובכנפי יונה, and in the feathers of a bird.
Now he's talking במה טומנים. Now it's not fire anymore. Or
these things, he says, you're allowed to put it, and they don't increase the heat. They just...
Or you can burn it too?
No.
This is fuel or no? That's what I don't understand.
No, none of it was fuel.
All of it was fuel?
No, before that it wasn't fuel. Even if it... just wool. If the wool is wet, you're not allowed to put your pot in it before Shabbat. You have got a hot pot.
Even if it's not fire?
Yeah, if it's just wet.
Oh,
why?
This is what fire to fuel this
No,
fire.
it tells you this is just like a mulch pile.
I see.
Wool,
okay.
The wool when it's wet will behave like a mulch pile. It will increase the heat.
And it continue now.
And now these things are not. Okay. טומנים בכסות in clothing ובפירות and in fruits and בכנפי יונה and in feathers of or wings of a dove. והוא הדין בשאר נוצות. It doesn't mean a dove, it means any bird, any feathers. ובנסורת של חרשים and in the leftovers of the woodworkers. How do you say נסורת? Wood dust. השובבים ואבק העצים, the wood dust, הנושרים מתחת למסור כשמנצרים את העץ, that comes under the saw when you are going to saw a piece of wood. ובנאורת של פשתן. Also you're allowed to put in the leftovers of פשתן. This is הקסמים of flax. הקסמים הנושרים מן הפשתן, this is the leftover that comes off from flax, כשמנפצים אותו, when you work it. דקה, as long as it is thin. רוב המפרשים אינם גורסים תיבה זו. Most of the things says it doesn't matter if it's thin or not thin, you're allowed to put it in. רבי יהודה אוסר בדקה. But Rabbi Yehuda says when it comes to flax, if it's thin, it's not allowed to, because it will increase the heat. But if it's thick, it will not increase the heat, and therefore you are allowed to. Rabbi Yehuda אוסר בדקה, בנאורת דקה, with flax which is thin, to לטמון בה בערב Shabbat, to put it in before Shabbos, שהיא מוסיפה הבל, that this increases the hevel. הוא מתיר בגסה, and he permits it in a thick one. אבל בנאורת גסה הוא מתיר לטמון. In a thick one he allows. ברם בנסורת, but when it comes to wood dust, מודה רבי יהודה לתנא קמא, שמותר לטמון בין דקה בין בגסה. רבי יהודה admits that when it comes to wood dust, it doesn't matter, it always, when it's thick, when it's thin, it always does not increase the heat, so therefore you don't have to worry, and you can use it as an isolation agent. ואין הלכה כרבי יהודה, and the law is not like Rabbi Yehuda. And remember, all these things is Erev Shabbat. It's not even on Shabbat itself.